All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, today's lesson is going to be about famous American soldiers who fought in World War One. Now, some of these guys became famous because they did some amazing things during World War One, and then some people were famous before World War One happened, and some were famous after World War One. They did things with their lives and stuff like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the warm up. So here's the picture right here. Okay, now basically the question is asking you which one would you rather do, work or fight? Now here's the thing though, you have to remember if you choose to work, you stay home here in America and you work, that means you're going to have to work, not just 8 hours. We're talking sometimes 10, 12, 16 hours sometimes, some places. Also, you'll be asked to sacrifice a lot, cut back on how much you eat. You have to go out and recycle, aluminum, stuff like that. So you have to do. You're asked to do a lot, you know, for to help the war effort. Now, to fight, okay, that means you're gonna fight, but at that time, those type of guns that they had back then. So no machine guns, no rocket launchers, none of that stuff. You also have to remember, tanks were barely created. They sucked. They weren't that great. They were hard to maneuver. They always broke down. The planes used back then weren't that great. They were like again some of the first planes ever used. Um, and if you're thinking about like being out in the ocean and battleships and some of that submarines, you have to remember radar or sonar hasn't been invented yet. So take that into consideration on both sides before you answer. Okay. But now that you've heard both sides, go ahead and tell me which one do you think more likely you would have chosen? And don't forget the why. Why did you choose to work or why did you choose to fight? Okay. So think about it, pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right. So the first person we're going to talk about is this guy named Henry Johnson, and that's him up on the top picture. Henry Johnson isn't a name that people remember for World War One, and it's sad because this guy did something very amazing. First off, he started off doing manual labor, so he was one of the guys who was like, clearing out, tree area so they can build roads, and so he might even have built a road, dug trenches, things like that. But then he was sent to help the French army. Okay, because you have to remember the French have been fighting for about good, 3 years, 4 years. So these guys are pretty tired. They're exhausted. So uh, Johnson and this other guy named Needham Roberts, another black soldier, were teamed together, and they were told, "Stay on this hill, stay in this position. Don't let these Germans, get past you." So there they are, just sitting on the side of a hill, you know, and then they're just looking out. Well, around 2 in the morning, 20 German soldiers start coming through the tree lines and then they come at them. Um, Needham Roberts and Johnson are both shot and wounded. Now, Needham Roberts is shot pretty bad and he can't take it. He's like, oh man, this and that, right? Johnson basically tells Roberts, he says, hey, give me your extra clips of ammunition, give me your grenades, I'll hold these guys off. So Roberts does. He gives them the extra clips of ammunition, gives them the grenades, and Johnson starts taking out the pins, starts throwing the grenades, right? Just start chucking them, start blowing up, right? German people are, being flung in the air and stuff like that. He then takes his repeater rifle and starts shooting, ka 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 ka, right? He starts putting in that clip, ka 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 ka. Well, the thing is, his gun jams. So now he takes his gun, flips it around, and uses it as a club, and he's attacking the Germans. He's swinging them around, trying to hit them, things like that. And what ends up happening is his gun breaks. Because you have to remember, this is not the time where guns like now are made of fiberglass and things like that, and other hard plastics. No, this is wood and metal. That's it. So the wood breaks, and that's what happens. He breaks it, So then he takes out his knife and he starts stabbing the Germans, going to different guys and stabbing them. Well, at this point, the Germans start retreating. They start running away. He ends up killing 12 Germans. Now, when he's all done, he's like exhausted. The adrenaline dies down. And then he realizes, oh my God, I've been shot and stabbed. You know, he's been shot like 5, 6 times. He has like 15 stab wounds all around him, his arms, back, his body, legs, right? So the whole time he's attacking the Germans, they're shooting him, they're stabbing him, they're doing all this stuff to him. His adrenaline, his fight to survive pushes him. And he gets Needham Roberts, and they both uh, get treatment, and he survives. Now, when word spreads of what Henry Johnson did, the French were like, wow, this dude's amazing. This guy is absolutely amazing. They give him the highest honor that they can give a soldier in the French army. Sad thing is, when Johnson comes back home, you know, they don't give him any praise, no medals, no calling him a hero, things like that. Mainly because he was black, as you can see. You know. Now, here's the thing. Some little good news though. I want to say in the past 20 years or so, one of the presidents, I can't remember if it was Obama or George W. Bush, but some president, more recent president, um, gave his family the Medal of Honor because they recognized, like, yeah, what he did was amazing, and he should be recognized for his bravery and his, ability to hold off and personally take care of 12 German soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. So, yeah. So he was honored. He is recognized now. Okay. The next guy you see on the picture there, that is Alvin York. Now, Alvin York was an army soldier, but the thing is, he actually tried to get out of being a field soldier. You know, he basically was like, you know what, I can't kill. It goes against my religious beliefs because he was very religious. He was a devout Christian, like very devout. And the army was like, well, you're a sharpshooter, right? And he's like, yeah. They're like, well, what are you shooting? He's like, squirrels. And he's like, they're like, well, see, I kill squirrels. So he's like, well, that's something different. That's for food, you know. This is killing somebody just cause, that's murder. That's killing. He's like, and the army was like, no, no. Now here's the thing. Like I said, he shot squirrels, and if you ever seen a squirrel move, they're fast and they're small. So that tells you how good of a shot he was. And it's because of that, in one particular battle, he flanks the Germans, right? Kills 20 of them, and then basically tells all the other soldiers, all the German soldiers, basically like, who's next? Put down your guns or you're next. And all the German soldiers put their guns down, and he takes them as prisoners and marches them um, to the Allied side. Now, those amount of soldiers, 132. One man captured 132 people with a with a rifle gun that has basically 5 bullets in it. This dude was able to capture all of them and make them march and surrender. So yeah, and of course, because again he is a white man at this time, when he got home, of course he was celebrated, being called a hero, things like that. He even had a movie made about him. You know, so yeah, but what he did was pretty amazing. Come on, capturing 132 German soldiers just by yourself, that's pretty awesome. The next person is a guy named Frank Luke. Now, before I get into him, you have to remember this. The Germans had these Zeppelin planes, were basically like big blimps. And once the blimp got high enough in the sky, planes couldn't reach them because the high altitude, you couldn't breathe air. The air was very, very thin. But what Frank Luke did is before those Zeppelin planes, those blimps, got high enough, he would shoot them down. He was known as the balloon buster. Okay, he was very, sure of himself. He had a cocky attitude, and he had this reckless flying style where he would just zip through people and things like that, and um, whatever it took to take down these, zeppelins, he would do. You know, and he's most famous for having 18 victories in 18 days. So that's pretty impressive. Most people get shot down, things like that. This guy for 18 straight days won his battles, so pretty impressive. But the thing is, he met his end. Basically, he was told, don't go after these Zeppelin planes, don't go after them. And he did. He went after three of them. And because of that, he was shot. And he was barely able, from my understanding, to land his plane. And he was riddled with bullets and he died because of that. So, but yeah, but what he did was pretty impressive, was pretty amazing. But because of his reckless style, he died at a young age. Now, this next guy is considered one of the, is if not the greatest Marine of all time. His name is Dan Daly. Okay, now before the war even started, this guy was such an amazing warrior and fighter. He already had two medals of honor already before the war started. And at one battle called the Battle of Belleau he and his men were being basically attacked and shredded by the Germans. And he knew they needed to do a counter hit on the Germans. So his men are hiding in like the holes behind rocks and trees and things like that. They're trying to take cover. And basically, he goes out in the middle of the gunfire from both sides and he tells his men, come on, you SOBs. Do you want to live forever? And he starts charging the Germans while they're shooting at him. So he's charging them, dodging bullets, things like that, right? And his men are like, oh my God, this dude's nuts. If he's going out there like that, we should do it too. So they get up and they start going. Some of his men get killed, some of them don't. And yeah, okay. Some people said he had like a suicidal courage. Maybe he did, but the thing is, it wasn't just that one time he did this. On June 10th, 1918, uh, he single handedly took out a machine gun nest. Now, the way the machine gun nest was positioned was, let's say here's a trench, right? The hole in the ground. Let's say it's right here. This is the front. Where it ended was about 5 feet, right? And behind that was a sub in a hole. These guys had a machine gun and they're just mowing down anybody who's coming toward the trench, you know. Well, he charges the machine gun nest. This machine gun's like right at him, and they're shooting at him, and he's dodging the bullets. And what he does is he jumps over the trench. He jumps like 5 feet across, goes to the machine gun nest, kills the machine gunist, kills the guy who's feeding the bullets into the machine, kills the commanding officer in the underground bunker area, and takes 14 people prisoner all by himself. Now, that's just half the day he does that. The other half of the day, he's going out to no man's land. And no man's land is, again, there's nothing there. Everything, all the trees, everything is just blown up, burned, destroyed. There's like holes where the bombs fell and things like that. And if you were to stand out there, the other side would take shots at you because you're a clear target. They're in a hole looking up, and there you are. So they would easily take shots at you. And that's what they did. They try to shoot him. Now, most people who get hurt and injured during these battles during in no man's land, a lot of times they're left there to try to crawl back if they can. Um, but otherwise, they're going to be out there and they're going to die. You know, So Daly basically goes out into no man's land and saves like 6 or 7 guys. While shots are being shot at him, he's grabbing people, dragging them back to the trench, saves one, goes back out there, grabs another guy, drags him back, So, yeah, brave, brave man. Uh, Once things are all basically said and done, his commanding officer, people ahead of him, are like, you know what? He deserves a third Medal of Honor. But the top generals and the top people are like, no one's ever had three Medals of Honor. We don't think he should have one, because Medals of Honor, that's what you give, and it's just a soldier to get one. That's like, oh my gosh, you are a true hero, like definitive definition of a hero. This guy already had two, and now like, well, how about three? They said no. How about this? They said, let's give him the Distinguished Service Cross, and then the French military, as a way of saying like, hey, you are a total badass. They give him a medal themselves, one of the top medals that they have for soldiers. All right, so those were the guys who got famous because of the war. Now let's talk about the people who got famous before the war and after. So the first guy we're going to talk about is this guy named Ernest Hemingway. Hemingway was already, when the war, before the war started, was a great journalist. His words were amazing, phenomenal. People loved reading his column pieces. But later on, he would become a very, very influential and amazing author. The thing is, when he signed up for the army, they basically told him, you have an eye defection. Something's wrong with your eye, and we can't have you on the field fighting if your eye is all messed up. So he still wanted to serve, help out some way, somehow. So he joined the Red Cross, and they basically told him, oh, well, why don't you drive these ambulances? So a guy with an eye defection is driving an ambulance, taking soldiers who are really wounded from the field to a hospital. The next guy is the one you see in that picture right there. That's one of my favorite actors. His name is Humphrey Bogart. Now, Bogart joined the Navy, and basically he transported soldiers from the ship to land and from land to ship. Um, he really didn't do too much like during the war, like winning a bunch of medals and fighting this and that. Um, but what he became famous for was after the war, he became an actor, and he starred in some amazing movies: The Maltese Falcon, Casablanca, The African Queen, Treasure of Sierra Madre. So many great movies, and he's considered an icon in old Hollywood. The next person is F. Scott Fitzgerald. I can't remember exactly if he was in, I want to say he was in the army, but he could have been in the navy. But after the war, in the 1920s, he wrote a little book called The Great Gatsby. And it was such a great book that it became required reading for high school students for years and years and years. The next guy, Horace Pippin, is African American. Um, I believe again he joined the army, and later in the 1920s he would be an amazing painter and quite a influential painter for African Americans during the Harlem Renaissance. The next guy is Bill Bojangles Robinson. Now, Robinson did not fight. He wasn't those type of guys who did that. But what he could do was entertain troops because he was already an established dancer. From my understanding, he was like a phenomenal dancer even before he was in the movies and some of that. So the army was like, okay, well, why don't you entertain our white troops and we'll pay you? What he did was said, well, how about the black soldiers? And they're like, no, no, no. You don't entertain the black soldiers. And black soldiers don't get entertainment. So he goes, how about this? If you let me entertain black soldiers too, um, you won't have to pay me. So the army was like, wait. So if we say no, we have to pay you, and you only, entertain white soldiers. But if we let you entertain white and black, we don't have to pay you. He's like, yeah. So they were like, okay, fine. We don't want to pay you, and he's basically doing double the work. because again, he felt, hey, the black soldiers deserve to be entertained and, have fun too. Now, the next guy, his name was Edwin Hubble. I couldn't find out if he was in the Army or Navy, but the thing is, after he gets, finished with the war, he becomes an astronomer, and he's the guy who discovered that the universe is expanding constantly. He was the guy who discovered that. So later on, some like 80 some years later, uh, NASA creates this big telescope that could see the supernovas and things like that light years away, and they named it after him. That's why it's known as the Hubble telescope. Okay. The next guy was famous before the war started. He's also considered one of the dirtiest baseball players of all time. His name is Tyrus Ty Cobb. Um, he played for the Detroit Tigers and Philadelphia Athletics, and he was basically the Babe Ruth before Babe Ruth, because when he retired, he basically had every single hitting record imaginable. He still has a couple records, still to this day. The highest career batting average of 366, and that's in a career, and total batting titles. So I basically found out through research that it's a debate between he won 11 titles or 12, but we know it's definitely at least 11. The next guy, Christopher Christie Mathewson. Um, Again, served in the army, didn't do anything like magnificent, historic, and things like that. No, but he served, and he was a pitcher for the New York Giants and the Cincinnati Reds. Later became a manager for the Reds, and ended up being a Hall of Famer. Okay. The next guy, Wesley Branch Rickey. Now, Rickey served in the Army, but before that, he was a catcher for the St. Louis Browns. And by the time the war ended, he tried to get back into baseball, but he was already like kind of too old for that now. So he became a general manager. Now, what he's most famous for is he was the guy who was the general manager for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And he's the one who said, we need to have a black man in baseball. And he was the one who basically was looking for a player to play for the Brooklyn Dodgers to break the color barrier, and that was Jackie Robinson. So that's what he's famous for. He's solidified in history with Jackie Robinson to break the color barrier. Now, thing is, not every actor, athlete, or celebrity served in the war. Okay. Some of them decided to stay home. They didn't want to fight. So they also too kind of were like, well, what are you going to do for the war effort? What are you prepared to do? So a lot of them did one of two things. One is they sold war bonds. Now these became known as Liberty bonds, right? Um, it's basically like a loan to the government, and 20 million people bought them, and they raised about $17 billion to the war effort. Now, like I was telling some people in class, if somebody in your family was to say have one of these bonds, or if you went to an old yard sale and you found a bond in like an old book or something from World War I, that thing would be worth millions of dollars. Because it also depends how much of a bond they bought. But back then they bought like a 20, well, no, not 20, like more like $50 bond, then yeah, it'd be worth millions. Okay. The other thing these athletes, celebrities, actors did was provide public service announcements. They would give tips and reminders to Americans to use less electricity, use less food, things like that. Recycle, get the old aluminum cans from your trash, save them, put them in another bag, and then that aluminum they can make bullets out of it and things like that. To help support the troops in our country, do what you can. Um, Go to work, make this, make that, buy this, don't use too much of this, whether it's gasoline, um, food or whatever. They're asking citizens to sacrifice. Okay. So that is your lesson for today. Okay. Again, for those of you guys who are used to that question at the end, there isn't one. That is now the exit ticket for the class. So the only way you can do the exit ticket is if you are in class. Now, also, you can make up those points. Okay. There's some crossword puzzles that I'll be making. There's some Achieve 3000 packets that I've made. You can do those, and that will make up for those exit tickets you missed. Okay. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. Okay. So with that being said, guys, you guys take care, be safe, and I'll see you guys later.